Hi guys, good morning. Uh, am I audible? Please confirm.
Yes, yes, sir.
Yes, sir, audible.
Yes, yes.
Sir.
Yes,
Can
sir.
you, can you see my
Yes,
screen
sir.
also?
Yes.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Very good. Very good. Yes, all of you, please check your mics. Keep your mic on mute. Stop your camera. When I ask some question, then you can unmute and you can respond to my question. Till that time, you can keep your mic on mute. Please don't disturb the session. Good. Let's get started. Yesterday's session, we discussed Spring Boot application, folder structure, and start class of Spring Boot. Okay. Today's session, we are going to talk about bootstrapping process in Spring Boot. Today we are going to talk about bootstrapping process in Spring Boot. Okay, when we create Spring application, Spring Boot starter application, Spring starter project, when we create Spring Boot starter project, by default, we will get boot start class. When we create Spring Boot starter project, by default, we will get Spring Boot start class. Spring Boot application execution will begin from that start class. Spring Boot application execution will begin from that start class only. Spring Boot application execution will begin from that start class only. That start class contains a main method. That boot start class contains main method which calls spring application.run method, right? So inside the run method, some logic is available to bootstrap our Spring Boot application. Now, so what is the structure of the Spring Boot start class? So Spring Boot start class looks like this: public class application. Class name can be anything. Public class application. Inside that we are having a main method: public static void main string arguments. Public static void main string arguments. Now inside that we will have spring application dot run method. Right now, whatever your application is there, that application type will pass as a first parameter and arguments will pass as a second parameter, and it contains one annotation called Spring Boot application. That is the annotation. Now we can call this is start class of the Spring Boot. Guys, please look at this source code. This code will be available in start class. Who will create this start class for us? When we create Spring Starter project, by default, we will get this start class in the boot application. So when we create boot starter project, by default, we will get boot start class. It is also called as main class in the Spring Boot application. It is also called as main class in boot application. It is also called as main class in boot application. Spring Boot application execution will begin from that start class only. Spring Boot application execution will begin from that start class only. That start class contains main method which calls spring application.run method. That start class contains main method which calls spring application.run method. Good, right? Now, so how that class is going to look like? The class looks like this. It contains one annotation which is called add boot application. So what is the purpose of this annotation? We'll talk about it. And it will contain one main method. Generally, we know main method is the entry point for Java program execution. Similarly, for the Spring Boot application execution, this main method is the entry point. Inside the main method, it is calling one predefined method which is available in Spring application class. Spring application is a predefined class which contains a static method called run, class name dot method name. For that, it is taking two arguments. One is type of the class and second one is the command line arguments that we are receiving. From here, application execution will start. What is happening? when this run method is called, that is called bootstrapping process of the Spring Boot application. That is called bootstrapping process of the Spring Boot application. Now, what is happening when this application is started? What is happening when this application started? Good. Now, first, Spring application dot run method. Spring application dot run method. That is predefined method available in Spring application class run method. Whenever this run method got called from the main method, first inside the run method, stopwatch is getting started. Stopwatch starts. What is the purpose of this stopwatch? It is used to calculate the time it has taken to start our boot application. Stopwatch is getting started. Now, some listeners will start. Listeners will start. Listeners will start. Those are used to perform some execution to load the components that are required for our application. Listeners are going to start. Then it is going to prepare environment. What are the profiles available in the boot application? What are the properties that are available in the boot application will be identified as part of that environment preparation. Now you can see this run method. Go inside the predefined method. It is internally calling the run method. Internally, it is calling the run method. Right. This is the logic. Okay. Right. Stopwatch is getting started. Some listeners are going to start. Then it is going to prepare the environment. After preparing the environment, it is going to print banner. It is going to print banner. That is the logo that you see on the console when the boot application execution started. That is the logo that you see and when the boot application execution started. That is the logo that you are going to see when the boot application execution started. Got my point? Fine. Fine. After printing the banner, what it is doing? It is creating application context. That means IOC container is getting created here. Create context. Create application context. Create application context, which is IOC container. So to run the boot applications, we need that IOC to perform the dependency injections. So to perform the dependency injection, we need IOC container. That IOC container getting started here, creating application context, then prepare the context. That means load the beans and instantiate them and perform the dependency injection. Those steps also will be taken care here, preparing the context. Then stop the stopwatch, calculate the time. Stop the stopwatch to calculate the time. So once the context is created, once the context is prepared, then our application is started. Our application is started. That means application startup process is completed. Then that's why they're stopping that watch and they're going to calculate how much time it has taken to start the project. After stopwatch is stopped, then they are checking loggers are available or not, and they are going to call the runners. So check for loggers, log startup info. If log startup info is true, then they are going to print execution time taken, log application execution time, log application execution time, log app execution time. How much time your application has taken to start, that time will be printed. That is log application execution time. So it has taken 10 seconds or 15 seconds to start the application. That execution time will be printed. After that, it is going to call the runners. Call the runners. Call runners. Boot supports for two types of runners. Boot supports for two types of runners. One is command line runner and another one is application runner. One is command line runner and another one is the application runner. After calling these runners, it will return IOC reference. Final step, return IOC reference. Return IOC reference, that is called configurable application context object. That is getting returned from here. configurable application context is getting returned from here. These all are the things that are doing by run method in the boot application. This is called bootstrapping process of our Spring Boot. This is called bootstrapping process of our Spring Boot. Are you guys able to understand? What is the bootstrapping process of the Spring Boot? What is the bootstrapping process of the Spring Boot? Are you guys able to understand this now?
Yes, sir.
Good.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Whenever we create
Yes,
a
sir.
boot application, one start class will be created. That is the entry point for boot application execution. That start class is also called as main class in the Spring Boot. Inside the start class, main method will be available. From there, our application execution starts. What is happening inside the main method? Inside the main method, we are calling run method, which is predefined method available in Spring application class. The run method is doing so many things internally. Now we are doing post-mortem of that run method. We are opening that run method and we are seeing what is the code that is done by Spring people inside the run method. So if you understand the run method, then you can understand internals of the Spring Boot, how the Spring Boot is working in the background. Inside the run method, first they are starting a stopwatch, which is used to calculate the time taken to start the application. After that, so to start this application, some jars it has to load and some components it has to start. For that, some listeners are available. It is starting those listeners also. Then after that, our application contains a properties. Our application contains a properties. Those properties it is going to load from the .properties file or .yml. That is called environment preparation. So in the going forward, we are going to see profiles in the Spring Boot. For every environment, a separate configuration file will be available. So which profile is enabled, that profile it is going to load. If any profile, if the profile concept is not there, then it will load the default file for the properties. After loading those properties and prepare the environment, then it is going to call one method called print banner. The print banner method is used to print that Spring logo on the console. If you want, you can stop the banner and you can customize the banner also. For time being, we are going with the default banner that is given by Spring Boot. We are going with the default banner that is given by Spring Boot. That banner is printing. Now, after banner print completed, then it is going to call one method, create application context. Guys, could you please tell me what is the purpose of this method, create application context? Can anyone tell me what is the purpose of create application?
Create IOC container.
It will create the IOC container.
It will create the IOC
Initialize IOC container.
Yeah. Why we need the IOC container?
For managing the dependency injection.
For managing the dependencies of our application. For managing dependencies of our application, we need IOC container. If you go for normal Spring application, who will create the IOC container? Who has to create the IOC container?
Manually we need to create it.
Programmer needs to create the IOC container manually. But when it comes to the Spring Boot, programmer is creating or programmer is not creating that. Programmer is not creating that. The IOC container is creating by boot only. Can I say it is something like a auto configuration?
Yes.
Why they are creating that? Because creating IOC container for managing the objects is only my project requirement or it is a universal requirement?
Universal requirement.
Universal requirement. That's why that Spring Boot team only creating the IOC container which is required to run our application. Very good. Now, after creating the IOC container, it has to prepare the context object. That means it has to load the classes which are recognized as a Spring Beans. It has to instantiate them based on the scope, and it has to inject those dependencies in the target classes. All those things will be taken care as part of prepare context. Prepare the context. Once prepare context is completed, your dependency injections are completed. Bootstrapping process is completed. So here bootstrapping process is started. Here the bootstrapping process is ended. Now, what is the total time? Start time, end time we have. End time minus start time. It is going to give you total time it has taken to complete that bootstrapping process. So in order to calculate the bootstrapping process time, They are stopping the stopwatch and they are executing end time minus start time. It will give you total time taken to bootstrap this application. After stopwatch is stopped, they are printing that log message, how much time it has taken for the bootstrapping. After that log is completed, then last stage, they are going to call the runners. So what is the purpose of runners? Can anyone tell me what is the purpose of runners?
To execute
Guys, come on.
logic only one
We
time
execute
when
a
application
logic
started.
one time.
If you want to execute any logic only one time, once your application is started, then you can go for runners. Could you please tell me what is the purpose of runners?
If you want to execute logic only one time at the time of server starting.
At that condition, we use runner.
If you want to execute any piece of logic only one time, once your application is started, then we can go for runners concept. How many types of runners available in the Spring Boot?
Two
Two
types.
types of runners.
Two types of runners available in the Spring Boot. What are those runners?
Command
Line runner.
Command line and application runner. Command line runner and application runner. So if you have two runners, which runner will execute first? Which runner will execute first? Look at this
Application
method.
runner.
Don't by heart. Don't by heart. Look at the method. You can see what runner they are calling first. Call runners. So which runner they are calling first?
Application runner.
Application runner.
Application runner they are calling first. Then they are running the command line runner. If you have both, if you create both runners in your project, first it will call the application runner, then it will call the command line runner. Okay, very good. So any logic you want to execute only one time after bootstrapping of the application is completed. So runners are calling at the time of bootstrapping or after the bootstrapping?
After the boot.
After bootstrapping.
After bootstrapping.
Runners are calling before IOC start or after IOC start?
After IOC starts.
After IOC start.
Are you sure?
Before IOC start, na?
Before IOC start.
Are you sure?
Before IOC start. Yes.
Yes.
Before IOC starts or after IOC starts?
After IOC starts.
After
IOC start.
After IOC.
After IOC start.
The diagram clearly I have given the diagram where IOC is starting. IOC is starting here. Where IOC is starting? IOC is starting here. But where the runner is calling? Here. Right. Now IOC getting called here. But where the runners are calling? Runners are calling here. Which one is happening first?
IOC.
IOC is starting first. IOC container is starting first. After that, it is preparing the context. Then it is stopping the watch. It is printing the time taken as a log message. Then it is calling the runners. Calling the runners is the last but one. Last but one step. After runners called, then it will return the IOC reference. Then run method execution got completed. Now, so what is the execution flow of the run method now? If you see the execution flow, first when the run method is called, it will stopwatch is starting, then listeners will start, then it will prepare the environment, then it is going to print the banner, then it is going to create the application context object, then it will prepare the context, it will make all the objects ready to use, then it will stop the stopwatch, it will print app execution time as a log message, then it will call the runners, then it is going to return the reference of the IOC container as a last step. Now, if you want to give me some numbering for this, first run method is called from the main method. Once run method is called from the main method, second step, stopwatch is starting. Third step, listeners are starting. Fourth step, preparing the environment. Fifth step, printing the banner. Sixth step, application context creation. Right. Seventh step, preparing the context. Eighth step, stopping the stopwatch. Ninth step, app execution time printing on the console. 10th step, calling the runners. Then last step, 11th one, return the reference of the IOC container. Now, guys, could you please go through all these steps now?
Yes, sir.
Could you please go through all these steps now?
Yes.
What is happening inside the run method? That is what we are trying to understand. What is happening inside the run method? We are trying to understand. Internals of the run method.
actual purpose of call runners actually? We want to know.
Sir,
Hello,
Yes, sir.
Ashok. Yeah,
Yes, sir.
what is the actual purpose of call runners in behind of run mechanism, run method mechanism?
Sir, now in my application, when my application started, I want to load some data from the database to the cache. Only one time I want to load it. I don't want to read the data from the database every time.
Okay, so this is the purpose. This is for okay, call runners basically happening.
Exactly.
Okay,
So now in my application, I want to use cache memory. I don't want to hit the DB every time to read the static data from the table. I will read the data only one time and I will store in the cache. Every time do you need to load the data into the cache, or you need to load the data only one time into the cache? Only one time.
Only one time.
It started. So
Yes.
loading the data into cache is the real-time use case why we need to go for runners.
Okay. Okay, so got it.
Good, sir.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Sir, but if later the data in the database change, then the data in the cache will become invalid.
I mentioned one point, static data. That means that should not be changed in the backend.
Okay.
Static data, which will not, no DML operations should apply on the data.
Can we use both the runners at a time, like application
You can
runner and
create
the command line?
both. You can create both runners at a time, but they will execute in the order. First one, application.
Application
Second,
runner.
command line.
Okay.
Yes. What is the difference between those two runners? We will discuss in the runners concept. Sir, why two runners are there? Why not one? That we will talk in the runners concept. Got it?
Sir, I have one questions.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Sir, generally we can say if it is main method means it will be the standalone application. Then how it will work Spring Boot application as a web application?
Sir, whatever you learnt in the Java, main method is used only for standalone application. That statement is wrong from now onwards because boot applications will execute from the main method only, whether it is a standalone or whether it is a web or whether it is a web service. They will start from the main method only. That is how they made it. Okay. Why? Because
Ashok, what listeners is actually doing the job?
sir, it is they are going to load some predefined components which are required to prepare the environment and to print the banners and all. Predefined components. Those are going to load.
sir, which kind of predefined components?
Suppose I want to load the data from the properties file. I need some classes for that, right? And I need to check which property is enabled, which profile is enabled. I need to check that. Some components are there, in the predefined classes are there in the Spring Boot. Those will be loaded in those listeners. And they will listen to that. Whenever the run method is called, we need some listener. Array, run method is called. If the run method is called, we need to load the environment. Listener. What do you mean by a listener? They will listen to some action and they will perform the operation. So whenever the run method is called, then they will realize that array run method is called. That means we need to do some activity and they are going to perform that activity. Got it? So this is bootstrapping process of our Spring Boot application. Now, if I don't call the run method in my boot start class, then what will happen, guys? If I don't call the run method in the start class of the Spring Boot, then what is going to happen?
Nothing will be happen basically. Spring Boot application is not execution. Not
Listeners will not start. Environment will not be print, environment will not be prepared. Banner will not be printed. IOC will not be created. Runners will not be called. IOC will not be available. Nothing will happen. So should I skip this run method or I should not skip this run method?
Should not skip the run method.
We should not skip this run method. If you skip this run method, your application will execute like a normal application. It will not become a Spring Boot application. Okay. If you remove this run method, your application will execute like a normal Java application with a main method. It will not execute like a boot application. If you really want to execute this application as a boot application, then you need to call Spring application dot run method. Somebody may ask you in the interview, could you please explain what is bootstrapping process of the Spring Boot application? Draw this diagram and tell him these steps. Hey, whenever application starts, whenever you start the boot application, the execution will begin from the start class. Inside the start class, we are calling predefined method called run method that is available in the Spring application class. Inside the run method, these are the things are going to happen. Stopwatch will start, listeners will start, environment will be prepared, banner will be printed, IOC container will be created, it will prepare the context object, it will stop the watch, it will log the execution time, it will call the runners. Finally, it is going to return the reference of the IOC container, which is called configurable application context. So could you please tell me what is the return type of the run method?
Configurable application.
Configurable application context object.
IOC container reference.
IOC container.
Context object. What is that configurable application context object?
Context.
IOC container.
IOC container
Reference of the
reference.
IOC container. If I have the reference of the IOC container, can I get the bin objects created by IOC? If I
Yes.
have reference of the IOC container, can I get the bin objects from the IOC?
Yes.
Yes, yes.
What is
Yes,
the method?
yes.
Get bin. What is the method? Get bin.
Get bin.
We are
Get
going
bin.
now. So let me go to our application class, Spring application not run method. Guys, now I will tell you one shortcut to get the return type of this method. Keep your cursor at the end of the line, press Ctrl 1 and enter. Press Ctrl 1 and enter. It will assign a return type to a variable. It will assign return type to a variable. Good. Assign statement to a local variable. Now it is assigning that method return type to a local variable. Now see it. I will show you the shortcut again. Let me remove this return type of this method. Remove the return type of this method. Now let's use the shortcut to get the return type. Hold on, it is building my project. Yeah. Press Ctrl 1, enter. Ctrl 1, enter. Then you will get this return value. Okay. What is the return value of that run method? Configurable application context. The return type of the run method is the configurable application context. Now, once you got this context object, you can call some methods. Run dot get beans count. Total how many? Run dot get bean method is available. Get bean definition count. How many beans are definitions are available? We can get the bean definitions count. Let me print that on the console. System.out.println bean definition count. Bean definition count. Printing. Spring application.run method, which is returning configurable application context object. Then we are calling bean definition count method, and I am printing that value on the console. Now, could you please tell me how can I execute this boot application? Come on, what is the execution process of a boot application?
Right click on
Right click on server.
Spring Boot app.
You
Spring
can
Boot app.
right click on the project.
Spring Boot.
Listen here. You can right click on the project, run as boot app. That is one way. Second way, directly this start class also you can execute. Right click, run as boot app or Java application. Anything you can use because it is starting. Right click on the start class, run as boot application. Right click on the start class, run as boot application. Got it. Now see the console. Banner is printed or not? Banner is printed.
Yes.
Now see some logs also printed. Started application in 5 seconds. It has taken 5 seconds to complete the bootstrapping process. Profiles, environment is prepared. Which profile it is activating? Default, because we don't have any profiles as of now. It is activating default profile. And it is printing log message saying that this application has taken 5 seconds to start. And bean definitions count. How many bean definitions are there? 35 definitions are available. Then application stopped. Okay, good. Now, let me debug this. Guys, yesterday I asked you people to go through my debugging video. Completed?
Yes, sir.
I told that today I need that time. Did you understand what is the debugging and how to do that?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Are you guys clear with my debugging concept?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Now I want to start the debugging. So before going to start, can anyone tell me what is debugging?
Sir, debugging is the process of finding the bug and resolving it.
Debugging is the process. Debugging is not only for finding the bugs. Debugging is the process to execute the program step by step and to understand the
Okay.
execution process.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
As part of the execution process, if any bug is there, we can identify that. Okay. So
Okay.
you can tell me what is debugging now? What is debugging now?
Debugging is the process to find the program execution step by step.
Yeah, debugging is the process of executing our program step by step.
Step by step.
Right now, so in order to start the program in the debug mode, what is first thing that we need to do?
We have to
Double click on the lines.
What is the double click? Keeping a breakpoint.
Keeping a breakpoint, toggle breakpoint
Yeah. Why we need to keep the breakpoints?
for
For
debug
checking that
pointer.
whether the
For debug
particular code
pointer.
is executing or not.
Pause.
To
Pause
stop
the
the execution of the
to
program.
stop the execution at that line. Now I'm stopping the execution at the 11th line. I'm stopping the execution at the 11th line. I kept a breakpoint in that line. Okay. Now right click. Should I use run as or I should use debug as?
debug as.
Debug as boot app. I'm using debug as boot app. Let's wait. Control will come to 11th line and it will wait for our response, wait for our input. It will wait for our input. Yep, switch. Yes, you can switch the perspective to the debug mode. Okay. Yes, now we are at the 11th line. Now I want to go inside the run method. What is the shortcut, guys?
Function F5.
F5.
F5. F5. F5. Now I want to go inside the run method. For that I will use F5 shortcut. Inside the run method, it is calling one more run method. So can I go inside that run method also?
Yes.
Yes. Yes. F5. Now inside this again it is calling constructor of the Spring application and it is calling run method. So what is happening here? Two things are happening here, guys. Could you please read this 1309 line number? Return new Spring application. That means, can I say it is creating object for the Spring application?
Yes, sir.
Creating object for the Spring application.
Yes,
If
yes.
object is created for the Spring application, can I say constructor will be called?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
For
yes.
the constructor, are we passing any parameter or we are not passing any parameter?
Passing the
One
parameter.
Parameters.
Some parameter. If we are passing some parameter for the constructor, that means some logic will be there in the constructor or logic will not be there in the constructor.
Logic
Logic will be
Logic
there in
will be
the
there.
Logic
constructor.
will be there in that constructor.
Constructor.
As you are passing, yes, the constructor is taking an argument. Some logic will be there in that constructor. Okay, fine. Next one. What is this?
Run.
Run method.
Calling
Run method.
Okay, now go inside this F5. So this is constructor. This is the actual constructor of our Spring application. In the Spring application constructor, this logic is available. Resource loader, application type, resource loader is there. It is loading primary sources. Now, guys, could you please read this is 282 line number? Very, very important. 282 line number. Could you please read what is the 282 line number?
Web application type.
Application type.
Application type
Deduce
deduce from the class path.
from
Class
Web
class.
application type dot deduce from the class path. Web application type dot deduce from the class path. Web application type dot deduce from the class path. That means some logic is executing inside that. Some logic is executing inside that. Now we'll come to that again. We'll come to that again. Remember that there is a method called deduce from the class path. After that, what is happening here? Run method is calling. After that, what is happening? Run method is calling. Now, good. F5. Now, did we enter into the run method now?
Yes.
Did we enter into the run method now? Yep, debug it. F6. Stopwatch is started. Bootstrap context is loaded. Listeners are loaded. Listeners are started. Preparing the environment. Preparing the environment. Then print the banner. It is preparing the environment, loading the properties. Loading the properties. Then print the banner. As of now, anything printed in the console or nothing is printed in the console?
Nothing is printed in the console.
Nothing is printed in the console. What is the first thing that will print on the console? Banner. I don't know, banner method is called or banner method is not called?
Call.
Banner method is called.
Not called. Still we are at the 320. This line is not yet executed. Now, let me come to the next line. I want to execute 322 line number. Can you tell me how to execute 322 line number?
No.
How to execute 322 line number?
F6.
F6.
What is the shortcut I need to use for that, man?
Control F6.
We need
F6.
to use not control F6, F6 key.
F6 only. F6 only.
F6 only, right. Print banner method is called. Then this banner is printed on the console or not?
Yes.
Yes.
So whenever print banner method is called, is it printing the banner on the console or not? So that means
Yes, sir.
some logic is available in this method or logic is not available in this method.
Logic is
Logic is
available.
Logic is
Logic
available
in this method.
Logic is used to print that banner. Now,
Banner.
what is happening in the 323 line number?
Create
Creating
application
application
context.
Application
That means
context.
IOC
IOC container is getting created.
created.
IOC container is getting created. Okay. IOC container is created. Now, see here, the logic is available to create the IOC container. Here the logic is available to create the IOC container. So there is a switch case. When we will go for switch case, guys?
Selection statement.
When
If
we
you
have
want to
multiple
execute
cases,
some
we have
logic
multiple
based on the conditions.
statements.
If you want to execute some logic based on condition, then we will go for switch case.
Switch.
Now, what is the switch case type they are checking? Web application type. What is the web application type currently here? None.
None.
Remember that point. Now, you may get a doubt. Sir, from where you got the web application type? I will come to that point. So it is checking, is it a servlet type? No. Is it a reactive type? No.
No.
If it is not satisfying servlet case, if it is not satisfying reactive case, then which case will execute?
Default.
Default.
Case will execute. So in the default case, what they are doing?
New annotation.
Object for configuration
application context.
They're creating and returning what? Annotation config application context. This is the class which is used to start the IOC container for our application. So creating the object, annotation config application context. This is the class which is used to start the IOC container. This is the class which is used to start the IOC container. Now IOC container is getting started. Object is created nothing but IOC container is started. By using which class they started that? Annotation config application context. Annotation config application context. Very good. Now context is ready or not?
Yes.
Annotation config application context, they have created IOC container. Then application startup preparing the context. They're preparing the context. See here, some loggers are executed here. Then they will stop the watch. They will print the loggers. They will call the runners. But currently, do we have any runners in our application or we don't have any runners in our application? Did I create any runners? Or I have not created runners now?
Didn't give, sir.
Runners in my application. I don't have any runners in my application. Very good. Now, after this, what is the last step? What is the last
Return
step?
context.
Returning
Return context.
What is that context? What is that context? Configurable application context. Bin definition count, 35 bin definitions are available. It is printing on the console. Now, did you understand internals of the run method now?
Yes, sir.
Once again, can we do some details now? I told you there is a method called deduce from the class path. Now we will come to that point. Now, keeping a breakpoint, again I am starting the debugging mode. Right click, debug as boot app.
Hello.
Right click, debug as boot app. Now, guys, tell me, how can I get into this run method? What is the step to execute to see the internals of the run method now?
F5.
F5.
Go inside the run method. Go inside the run method.
Sure.
Now, internally it is calling again run method. Go inside that. Now, here, what is happening in the 1309 line number? What is happening?
Application constructor call with parameters.
Constructor is getting called After that, run method is also getting called. Okay, go inside this. Now here, this, what is the meaning of this?
String
Again,
application constructor.
constructor is getting called. Now go inside that constructor. The here it is important, guys. It is important. Resource loader. Okay. Resource loader, that's fine. Asset not null. Properties must not be null. That's also fine. Linked has set object created. Now, what is
The line number
282
282.
line? What is 282 line?
Web application type
Web
dot
application
from
type.
class.
Netaji Mane, please mute your mic, sir. Now, so here 282 line web application type dot deduce from class path. Can we get into that method now? Can we see what is that? What that method is doing? Can we check what that method is doing now?
Yes.
Deduce from class path.
F5.
Come on.
Press F5.
F5.
F5. Very good. F5. Excellent. Deduce from the class path. It is a static method. Class utils dot is present. Webflux indicator class. Webflux indicator class. It is checking in the class path. In the class path, reactive dispatcher servlet class is available or not. What this is doing, sir? Deduce from the class means deduce from the class path means it is checking in the class path. In the class path, webflux indicator is available or not. Webflux indicator class means what? Reactive dispatcher handler. Reactive dispatcher handler. If reactive dispatcher handler or web MVC indicator class not available, and here if dispatcher servlet is not available, so dispatcher handler should be available, is present, and dispatcher servlet is not present, and jersey indicator class is not present, that is servlet container, then what they are telling, this is a web application, this is a reactive application type. So here deduce from class path method is used to identify what type of application you created. Guys, are you able to follow my words now? Very important. Very few people knows about this concept. Deduce from class path. So what is the meaning of deduce from the class path? Deduce from the class path method is used to identify what type of application you have created. So first they are checking webflux indicator class is available or not, and dispatcher servlet is not there, and jersey indicator is not there. Then they are going to tell you that this is a reactive application which is using webflux. It is Spring 5.x feature. This is a Spring 5.x feature. Now, if that condition is not satisfied, then what they are checking? They are checking servlet indicator class is available. Servlet indicator classes. What are the servlet indicator classes are available? In that, if this class name is not present, then they are telling that this application is none type. That means it is not a web application. It is not a reactive application. It is a normal standalone application. If servlet indicator classes are there, then it is going to tell you this application is a servlet type. That means it is a web application. If this condition satisfies, it is a reactive application. If this condition satisfies, this is not web, not reactive, then it is going to become a web. So
what is reactive?
Deduce from the class path. Deduce from the class path is going to identify what type of a project you have created. So they are going to check the build path. If the build path contains webflux, then your application comes under reactive. If your build path contains dispatcher servlet, then it comes under web MVC application. If there is no dispatcher and there is no webflux, then it is going to consider as a default application, which is standalone application. That is what we created. Now check it. First condition satisfied or not satisfied? Not satisfied. Second condition satisfied. If it is satisfied, what it is going to return now? None. None means
default.
None means it is not reactive. It is not web. It is not reactive. It is not web. It is a none application. None application. Now that is what determined in this method. Where we are going to use it? Web application type. This application type is used to create the IOC container. Okay, if your application is a reactive based, it will use one class to start the IOC container. If your application is a web MVC type, it will use some other class to start the IOC container. If your application type is a none, it will use another class to start the IOC container. Guys, do you understand? Lot of depth is there in this point.
Yes.
Did you understand what is the purpose of deduce from the class path now? I told you that is important. What is the purpose of that? What is the purpose of this? Deduce from class path.
To identify which
To
type
identify
of
the
application.
Identify which type.
Identify which
Application we are
class
creating.
to
Identify what type of a project we have created. Spring Boot application
Project we have.
belongs to three types.
reactive.
standalone
Reactive.
Spring Boot application created, Spring Boot application can be created by using three types. Spring Boot application can be created in three ways. It can be a servlet application, servlet based, that is web MVC application. It can be a reactive application. It can be a standalone application.
Standalone application.
Standalone application. Okay, come here. Now, what is my web application? What is my application type now? None. None means what?
None.
standalone.
Standalone. Very good. Come here. Spring Factory instances, it is going to load. Deduce main application, it is going to load. Hold on. Now come to the
ఇప్పుడు రేపటి నుంచి చేసుకుంటాం మేము మరి నాన్న అడుగు సారీ
now come to the actual run method. Come to the actual run method where we have that. Come to the actual run method. Okay, let me debug it again. Let me debug it again. Now application got terminated. Let me debug it again. Right click, run as, sorry, not run sir, it should be in the debug. Let me stop it. Debug as boot app. Debug as boot app. All right, now let's go inside this method F5. I'm going inside the run method, guys. Again, go inside this run method. Again, inside this. Now is constructor. Now, do you understand what is the deduce from the class path now? Do you guys understand what is deduce from the class path now?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
What is happening in the deduce from the class path?
It will identify what type
Identify
of
which type of
application we are
application.
creating.
Identify type of applications.
Yeah, application can belongs to three types. It can be a standalone, it can be a web MVC, it can be a
Reactive.
Reactive.
So I have a
Sir,
question.
what is
Sorry,
reactive,
editor.
sir?
Yeah. What is reactive?
Sir,
Yeah.
reactive is a Spring 5.x feature. It is an event-driven programming. We'll come to that point, sir. Okay, that is a new concept added in the Spring 5.x version. We'll come to that. Asynchronous
Okay.
programming is supported there.
Okay. So you will also cover in
Yep,
this.
I will cover that. I will cover that.
Okay, boss.
Okay.
I told you the best content you are going to get in the market. Still, I'm stick to that word. Now, run method. Run method. This is the actual run method. This is the actual run method. Now, look at it. Come here. Run method is getting called. Sir, please mute your mics. Lot of disturbance is creating. Mr. Omshidhar Bangaram. Who is that Omshidhar? Please keep your mic on mute. Lot of disturbance. How much interesting concept I am explaining, you people are disturbing the session. Please support, cooperate, sir. Now, stopwatch is getting started. After this, we are calling one method called create application context. We are calling one method called create application context. What is the purpose of create application context method? What is the purpose of create application context method?
To create IOC
To create IOC container.
Create IOC container.
To create the IOC container. To create the IOC container. Now, go inside that method. It is internally calling application factory.create. What it is passing as a parameter?
This
Application
application type.
What is the application type now?
None.
Why it is none?
Standalone.
Because
It's not a.
it is not a web application and
Not a web
reactive
application.
also.
Not a
reactive.
reactive.
Not a reactive and it is not a web application.
Very good. Very good. Create application context. Yes. Now let me do one small thing. Let me go to drop to frame. Do you guys know what is drop to frame?
No.
What is drop?
Again, go to the start.
Starting again.
Starting position.
That's why I asked you to watch my video yesterday. In that I explained what is drop to frame. F6. Now I am going to this method again. Create application context. Create application context and I will see what is happening in the background. F6. Create application context. Okay. Go inside this method. Now go inside this method. Now, can you understand this logic? What is this web application type parameter we received? None value. If it is none value, can I consider my application is a standalone application?
Yes.
Can I consider?
Yes,
Sure.
Yes.
Yes,
If
sir.
my
Yes.
application is a standalone application, which class it is using to start the IOC container?
Annotation for the
Application
Application
configuration.
context.
Application context.
If my application is a web MVC application with the dispatcher servlet, which class it will use to start the IOC container?
Annotation config.
Annotation config.
Server application context. If my application is a reactive application, how IOC container will start?
Reactive web server application context.
It is using annotation config reactive web server application context class object is creating to start the IOC container. Okay. Generally, outside trainers will tell you, "Arey, you no need to start the IOC container. Spring Boot will create the IOC container internally." But our students will tell there are 3 ways to start the IOC container in the Spring Boot. That will be depends upon the type of the application you create. That Spring Boot is going to deduce from the class path what application you have created. Based on the application type, they will use the respective class to start the IOC container. Understood?
Yes, sir.
How many ways IOC container is creating in the Spring Boot?
Three.
Three types.
3 ways.
3 ways. Why 3 ways are there?
Same
One for
annotation config
standalone,
servlet.
one for
One is for standalone application, one is for servlet application, that means web application, another one is for reactive application.
Reactive.
So to create the IOC container, Spring Boot is using 3 different classes. Based on the type of the application, it will create the object for particular class. They will start the IOC container. So tomorrow if somebody asks you how IOC container will be created in the Spring Boot, then you have to explain this piece.
Yes, sir.
Are you getting confidence now?
Yes.
How Spring Boot is working internally?
Yes, sir.
So how the boot will understand how to start the IOC container, which IOC container it has to start. They are going to check it from the class path. That means it depends upon the dependencies you added in the pom.xml. Currently, we have one boot starter. That boot starter belongs to default. If I add a web starter, currently what starter available? Normal, generic starter is available. It will consider under standalone application. If I keep Spring Boot starter web, if I keep dependency as a Spring Boot starter web, then what will happen, guys?
And web application type will be servlet.
Then MVC, sir, IOC will be.
It will become under servlet based application.
Servlet-based.
I keep the starter as a web flux.
It's a reactive.
It will be reactive.
Reactive. So based on the starter available in the build path, it is going to identify what type of project you have created. Did you understand? So that is called
Yes, sir.
deduce from the class path. Based on the class path, it is going to identify what type of project you have created.
Sir, class path in this sense, pom.xml file or Maven dependent.
Whatever you added in the pom.xml, they will be downloading those dependencies to the class path, right? You load from the class path.
Yeah, okay.
You load from the class path.
Sir,
Okay.
when dependencies will be injected into the application
Prepare
after
context
the
object.
startup?
Prepare context
Hello.
object getting called, na?
So, sir, that class utils dot is present method is pointing for class path only, right?
Sorry?
That class utils dot is present method was there, right?
Yes.
That is used, that will point to the class path only, right?
Yes, yes, sir. Yes.
Okay, okay.
Hello. Yes, sir. Your voice is breaking, man. Suraj, your voice is
I
breaking.
wanted to know, yes, the web application.
Sir, who is speaking? I'm unable to hear your voice.
Okay.
Please type in the chat box. Please type in the chat box. I'm unable to hear your voice. Please type in the lot of resound is coming. Type in the chat box. Okay. Guys who are watching from YouTube, you can find the Zoom details in the description of the video. If you have any questions to discuss with me, please join in the Zoom class. You can see the Zoom details in the description of YouTube video that you are watching now. You are watching now. Okay. The people who want to get this class recording and class video and class notes, please visit our website ashokit.in. In that online training schedules, Spring Boot with microservices entry is there. Here we have a register option. Please click on that. Google form will open. Please provide your details here. I will send you an email with previous batch classes, recordings and class notes also I will send. People from YouTube, please come to the Zoom. You can ask your questions. I'm stopping the live stream now. Thank you guys.